Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today I have with me two very well-known analysts who are experts in their respective fields. Welcome Ahmed and Khalid. Okay, now let's talk about the latest developments in Pakistan in the region. As we all know that Afghanistan's takeover by the Taliban has also given a new life, I would say, to the TTP. And yesterday we learned that the government of Pakistan is negotiating with them that if they lay down their arms, they will be accepted back in the society. Many people find this quite alarming, and I would say including me. Actually, there are reports that a certain group of the larger TTP, only the Hafiz Kul Bahadur splinter group is part of the negotiations to lay down their arms and not the entire TTP. But the interesting thing is that at the time that some people were claiming that there has been a temporary ceasefire between Pakistan and the TTP, exactly at the same time yesterday, that is on 1st October 2021, the TTP claimed that it had killed Pakistan's military intelligence official Naqibur Rahman in Dera Ismail Khan. We will also discuss the role of Iranian proxies in Pakistan, but first let us talk about talks with the TTP. Can there be a simple answer to this development? I mean, is it good or bad for Pakistan? Or is this a very complicated matter and there is no simple answer? I would like you to comment on this, Ahmed and Khalid. And please go ahead, whoever wants to speak first.
Ahmed, do you want to go first or should I go first?
You can go ahead if you would like, Khalid.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. I was with, I think we've done one conversation about this TTP resurgence. I think we need to understand that even today there was a TTP attack in North Waziristan in Meradi, where 4 of our Jawans embraced martyrdom. Okay, if we all recall, back in 2007 when the TTP, the Taliban Pakistan, took life, at that point there was something in the neighborhood of 50 different groups that had aligned underneath one banner. Now we are talking about splinter groups, we are talking about maybe 10 groups that are properly formed that have some kind of organizational structure to them. Yes, the government of Pakistan is talking to some of the splinter groups. Yes, the government of Pakistan has offered to let them back into society if they lay down their arms. From my own personal position, from Command 11's position, we believe this is the most foolish thing that we can do as a government right now. We have to understand in Afghanistan, the Taliban taking over there has emboldened different extremist groups around the world. Inside of Afghanistan, you have ISIS Khorasan fighting the Taliban. There are many assassinations, there are many executions, there are many fights between both groups now inside of Afghanistan. You have the TTP that's moving in and out across the border. They have some support inside of Pakistan. Sorry, not some support. They have a great deal of support inside of Pakistan, inside the FATA region. We have to understand that when we start talking to the TTP, we've done this many times in the past, whether it be Musharraf's government, whether it be Zardari's government. There's always been some attempt at conversation because we know there is no military victory to have here. It's just not possible. You cannot kill everyone because that's an ideology, it's not a fighting force. So there have been many attempts at this in the past, but the problem has been that every time we have taken one step forward, the TTP has splintered, and we've seen a new range of attacks start from someone like Jamaat al-Ahd, which was also a TTP group until the negotiations started between the TTP and the government of Pakistan, and then we saw that break. And once it broke, they became the aggressor, while the TTP sat back and said, look, we have nothing to do with them, we're not helping them, we're not interested in them, they're their own group. And the TTP continued having negotiations with the government of Pakistan. We have to understand this is a very dirty game to be played here. There's no way that our families who have have shaheeds, who have martyrs that have been sacrificed in this fight, that they would accept any kind of amnesty. Being someone who, and some of you know my background, some of you don't, I fought against the TTP in SWAT as part of the militia that was created, the public militia that was created by the Pakistan Army here. So I have seen these people face to face. I understand what kind of mentality we're dealing with, and the concept of even laying down arms is very difficult for them. Because even if you negotiate with the leader of a group, that group does not all of their followers don't have to follow. Some can say, no, we're going to splinter off into another group and we are going to join this organization or this organization and we're going to continue our fight. The problem we have here now is there is an understanding that there is a strength in Afghanistan with the Taliban taking over. The Taliban has already announced, I think it was 2 days ago or 3 days ago, that they will not allow any groups that will carry out any attacks on Pakistan, China, Iran, and I can't remember the other country, to take any kind of space inside of Afghanistan. So whether it be a publicity move by the Taliban or whether they actually mean what they have to say, they are cooperating in some of the demands that Pakistan has made. The problem we have is the party sitting on the other side of the table, our counterparty, is not trustworthy. And at any point when you're dealing with a party that's not trustworthy, there cannot be any faith put in those negotiations or any promises that can come out of those negotiations. We've seen this over and over with the government of Pakistan, the Pakistan Army, sitting down with the TTP, even main leadership, and it splinters and we have fighting again, and we have fighting again. So from my point of view, before I hand it over, from my point of view, I think this is a mistake to negotiate like this and not have some kind of constraints in place. There is no way we can do this without providing justice to the families that have either had shaheeds, have had their houses destroyed, have had their lives destroyed. That has to be there. There can be no negotiation without that. And you know the TTP is going to say, we want amnesty claim. So I'll hand over to Amit from that, but that's where we stand on this.
Right. Ahmed, before you comment, I just want everyone to know that TTP Central that earlier rejected Islamabad's amnesty proposal, it claims, and this is from their official sources, they claim that they have carried out 37 attacks in Pakistan in the month of September alone, the month which has passed, and which resulted in 72 deaths and 71 people were injured. So what do you think about these talks?
Yes, Qudsiya, thank you very much, Khalid. I fully agree with the assessment. And just to add to what the point that Khalid began with, which is the attack that took place in North Waziristan, and in fact five. We have 5 Pakistani soldiers, one from the levies, and I think 4 from frontier corps, I think. So we have a total of 5 from the Pakistani military side who embraced martyrdom in this attack. So this is a good example of the fact that the fight actually continues. So just to begin with what Khalid started with, which is the attack that happened in North Waziristan, I think today, and it led to 5 Pakistani soldiers being killed, embracing Shahada, martyrdom. It shows that the fighting actually with TTP or TTP itself continues despite all the talk and despite the Prime Minister's statement that Pakistan is negotiating with the TTP or trying to open talks with the TTP. So we should be very clear from the outset that despite all this talk about talk, the fight on the ground actually continues. So that's number one. Number two, it might be bad morally to speak about talking to the TTP, to the Pakistani Taliban. But from the standpoint of being realistic, Pakistan has only 2 options, which is one is to talk and the other is to fight. Fighting continues, as I said. So talk is the new option actually, which is being explored. It makes perfectly good sense for Pakistani policymakers, for the government, to exploit the presence of Afghan Taliban in Kabul to use their good offices to try to explore talks with the Pakistani Taliban. So the only difference we have on the ground right now is that Pakistan actually continues to follow the old policy of eliminating the TTP wherever is possible, and intelligence-based operations continue in the border regions with Afghanistan. Wherever hideouts of the TTP are found, they are not spared. These talks do not mean that Pakistan will not take every and any opportunity that presents itself to eliminate TTP and to limit them. Pakistan will do that. The only thing that has changed, and we do not have a situation where, for example, Pakistani military, if it finds elements of the TTP anywhere, that Pakistani military would or will spare them. It will not. So it will not spare them. And the only thing that has changed is that there is an option that is being explored to open talks with the TTP using the good offices of the Afghan Taliban, using the opportunity of the presence of Afghan Taliban in Kabul. So that's the only thing that has changed. An option is being explored. It could work. It may fail. We can have a range of opinions on whether the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, are amenable to talks. Are they open to it? Khalid just explained, and I agree with him, that all those people who have actually seen the TTP, the Pakistani Taliban on the ground, agree that these people cannot be made to come and sit on the table and agree to conditions. So the likelihood is that the fight will continue, which has not stopped, but it makes good sense, it's realism, to explore the presence of Afghan Taliban in Kabul, to use their offices to speak with them. And if the TTP and their different cells continue to persist on their policy, then Pakistani government actually strengthens this position by saying that, we've tried to explore the peaceful options. And let's not forget also, when you offer talks to the TTP, to the Pakistani Taliban, you hope actually to maybe create some fissures and divisions within the TTP, because TTP is basically not a one organization, monolithic organization. It's a combination of cells that are pretty much decentralized, and you have different commanders in different areas, and it makes good sense to try to create fissures between them by creating the impression that you're engaging some and maybe entice the others who are not willing to talk to maybe get engaged, or to react by severing their ties to those commanders who are engaging with the Pakistani government. So it's a game. Let's see how it works out. But the initial signs obviously are not very encouraging and are not good for the talk.
Right. So you said that there is one positive aspect to this, that it may create fissures among their different splinter groups. There is a very interesting bit of information that Khalid shared today on Twitter, and it is a list of the past negotiations, the pacts that we made with the TTP. And starting from 2004 April, the deal was violated. Then in 2005, it was again violated, and 2005 July, then it was 2006 September, 2008. Every time the deal was violated by the TTP. And if someone is interested in looking at all the details, they can check Khalid's timeline today. As you have to go early, Ahmed, I think I should start taking questions. And this is a question from Falak Sherhan, and he has a question for both of you actually. If the state of Pakistan is negotiating with the Khawarij and terrorists like TTP, where will it stop? Will they also hold talks with the BLA, BRA, PTM now? And who will guarantee that they're not going to carry out terrorist activities again? I think this is a very important question. Ahmed, you go first, then Khalid will answer this question as well.
Okay, so it makes sense in all conflicts to take any opportunity to open talks. It's not a bad thing, as long as you're negotiating or talking from a position of strength. And I think the Prime Minister did well although he said this, but I think he did refer to, if I recall correctly, he did refer to the fact that we will be speaking from a position of strength. I may be wrong on this point, actually. I'm just not recalling exactly if he mentioned this. But if you speak to the people who are actually involved in this policy, the idea is that Pakistan, in any talks with these terrorists, these talks are being made from a position of strength. So Pakistan is not really laying down weapons. Pakistan is not stopping, eliminating, and killing these terrorists wherever they are found. Pakistan is talking to them from a position of strength. If they come down, if they agree to the conditions, these talks will move forward. If they do not, the current policy has not changed, which is to kill these terrorists wherever they are found. So, and I think the government probably should make and emphasize this point very clearly. My understanding as a journalist following this story is that Pakistan is doing it from a position of strength and total and complete strength. There is no listening to the demands or cowering to the demands of these terrorist groups. That's number one. And number two is, as far as the BLA and others are concerned, although there is no statement from the government yet except the one made by the Prime Minister, that we have similar talks going on with some of the groups that are active in Balochistan, but without mentioning which group specifically, yes, there are talks going on and are moving, I understand, are moving quite well actually, much better than the TTP. They're moving quite well in Balochistan. But they're not concluded yet. It's not definite, the conclusion. We have to wait and see for that. Again, in Balochistan, as well as with the TTP, Pakistani negotiations are from a position of strength. If they work, that's well and good. If they don't, these terrorists will be eliminated. The fight will continue. So I have no doubt about the fact that Pakistan has not laid down arms in front of these terrorist groups. No such situation has transpired so far. And definitely, my understanding is that this is not the policy of the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan to lay down arms in front of these terror groups. The idea is to present them an opportunity when we are using the good offices of the Afghan Taliban to speak to the TTP. It makes good sense to also speak to the groups that are active in Balochistan, since all of these groups actually did use the Afghan territory against Pakistan, and since the situation now has changed in Kabul, it makes sense from a realistic point of view, from a strategic point of view, to engage and offer these conditions to these groups. If they accept, that's well and good. If they do not, they will certainly face elimination. There's no change in Pakistani policy in that regard.
Right. So you are saying that Pakistan has not changed its stance and it has not laid down arms in front of these terrorist groups, and it is still hunting them and killing them. Khalid, what do you have to say about the same question?
Well, I think Amit's right. First off, we have to understand that Pakistan, not just Pakistan, but any country, when negotiating with an enemy, you must negotiate from a position of strength. Now, I will hold a different point of view in where Amit says we are negotiating from a point of strength. I think we're negotiating from a point of international pressure right now. The Afghan Taliban is taking power in Afghanistan, yes. But there's infighting inside of the Afghan Taliban as well. We have to be very careful on who we trust right now. Because there may be some elements within the Afghan Taliban that will have loyalty to the TTP. With those pieces in play, we need to be very careful. Now, Imran Khan's position to negotiate with the Taliban is excellent. Again, you cannot win a war. There is no military victory in the world. You cannot annihilate a country or a people just to win a war. That's just not possible. So at some point we had to come to the negotiating table. But past history has shown us that the party across the table from us is not trustworthy. Not trustworthy from 2 points of view. Number one, whatever they commit to, they don't follow. They follow it for a certain amount of time, 2 weeks, 20 days, which I have always understood as to be their reload time, their restart time. Once they've restarted, repositioned, and are ready again, they start their attacks. Number two, if it's not the main TTP branch, it turns into a splinter group. For example, and many people don't know this, TTP SWAT was actually kicked out of the core TTP group because they were too violent. Now, understand that. Ayatollah Masood did not feel that this group fit the ideology of the TTP and he kicked them out because they were too violent. We have to worry about this now because there are certain elements within the TTP that have gotten training from ISIS inside of Afghanistan. They've learned how to make vehicle-borne IEDs. They've learned how to make much better suicide vests. They've learned how to make much better deadman switches. This fight, even if we're talking about 10 groups, 15 groups, can escalate very quickly. And it can turn into mass bloodshed. You have to understand that we've always believed the TTP has two pieces to it. One, the ideological fighter that actually believes that that is a jihad. Number two is the paid mercenary. Now, the ideological fighter, when he believes that at some point his demands are going to be met, he will lay down his arms. The paid mercenary will not. And that paid mercenary is the one we need to worry about. That is the guy that will continue fighting, increase bloodshed, increase violence, just to achieve a point. If you recall, there was a time when we were negotiating with the TTP, many years ago, that we talked about handing over part of Fatah. Now understand what I just said. Our government, to appease the TTP, back in I think it was 2015, 2016, maybe 2014, we actually put on the table that we'll give up part of Fatah to the TTP and they can have their own government and run it however they want. That is something we need to keep in mind, that our government has the ability and has the tendency to over-deliver. We'll give you this, we'll give you this, we'll give you this, getting very little back in return. Now, the second part of the question, where does this end? The idea of not negotiating with hostile parties to your state is something that will never end. Every fight, whether it be ideological, whether it be in media, whether it be on the ground with military or guerrilla fighters, at some point you will sit down to the table and negotiate a peace deal. There is no such thing as winning a military war. It's not happened so far. For us, we have to understand that for Pakistan, PLA is a big concern. The TTP is also a big concern. PTM, to a certain level, has reached a level of acceptance within the government of Pakistan because they've been invited to the National Assembly, they've met with senators, they've met with members of government. Their representatives are in the National Assembly as MNAs. So we have to understand that PTM has achieved a level of acceptance in the government of Pakistan, which we should have never allowed. But foolish decisions lead to drastic consequences. The problem we have right now is that we need to figure out who our biggest threats are and how we can counter them. The problem, Pakistan at this point does not understand that question. The commitments from the government that we are negotiating with this, we are talking to the BLA, and I agree with Ahmed that there is a conversation going on with the BLA, but it is specific commanders that are laying down their arms and pledging allegiance to the state of Pakistan. It is not BLA centered. It is not the core group. We are counting on the Taliban to help us on the Afghanistan side, eliminate their safe havens, give us the ability to fire into Afghanistan without them saying, this is a war attack, this is a war footing. So there's a lot of things at play right now. The idea of being able to take this thing off the table that we will not negotiate with our enemies is something we can never do. We will always have to keep that on the table. So where can it go? How far can it go? That depends on the person on the other side of the table. The government of Pakistan, the military of Pakistan wants peace in Pakistan, and they want peace in Afghanistan as well. The only way you're going to achieve that is sitting at the table and talking about it.
The only way is to achieve that is sitting on the table and talking. So you're agreeing with this stance of the government here? There's some positives you're saying.
I'm not giving you 100% agreement on the stance of the government because I don't think there should be the conversation of amnesty yet.
Right.
I think there needs to be a conversation of accountability first. I think there needs to be a conversation of what the TTP is willing to let us punish them for because they have committed major crimes. It is not like they've just slapped us on the hand and oh no, let us deal with
Right.
this. 80,000 lives we have lost. There has to be accountability. There cannot be general amnesty. So yes, I do agree that there should be negotiations, but I think it should be negotiations in stages with very strict conditions as to what will be negotiated.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. Ahmed, now I have a question. I actually have two questions from Saqib Khan and he wants you to answer them. I will take the first question regarding TTP and we can come to the second one which is about Iran. We'll discuss that later. Is there any chance that TTP will surrender via negotiations? Agreement with the banned outfit is supposed to be a give and take, but it seems that the state gives much more than it takes. Do you agree with this assessment?
Maybe partially. I would be very cautious to agree with this. Saqib, and in answer to this question, I mean, we have very few examples in the modern history of conflict where anyone who gets a chance to have weapons and arms in their hands, that they willingly let them go. It doesn't happen unless you defeat one party defeats the other in conflict, or we have very, very limited cases in very different circumstances where militants actually surrendered and laid down arms. So anyone who gets power in their hands does not let go of that power very easily without some terms and conditions that partially get them what they want. In this case, in our case, with the TTP, there are so many things. It's a very complex situation. Some of the TTP cells have religious considerations. Some of them are simply armed bandits and are out there to make money, kidnap for ransom, be hired gun for anybody who's willing to pay, and to secure influence and power in that area. So you have religious considerations, you have armed bandits, and some of those armed bandits now have linkages to narco traffickers, drug smugglers, people who are dealing with smuggling from Central Asia to South Asia, from Central Asia to Iran, and so forth. So it's a very complex situation, and different cells with different motivations. All of them obviously use the cover of religion. They're fighting to implement Sharia, their version of Sharia, and so forth. But it really comes down to narrow interests, and those differ at the lower level within TTP from one cell to another cell and from one area to another. We even have differences, for example, between some of these cells who are in North Waziristan, in South Waziristan, and so forth. So some of their sympathizers in urban areas, for example, have other interests, are more, some of them are aligned with religious reasons, some of them are aligned for other reasons. So it's a complex situation. Nobody lays down arms voluntarily, and nobody lets go of power once they have it in their hands. The state, obviously, and I agree with Khalid, it's going to be very, very difficult. Probably there are more chances that it will not succeed. But again, I think I understand the position of the Pakistani government when it decides to use the good offices of the Afghan Taliban. And I agree with also Khalid that Afghan Taliban are not one on this point. We have sympathizers within Afghan Taliban with the TTP. In fact, probably there are more sympathizers than they are not. But it makes sense really to test the Afghan Taliban and see what they can do. And we shouldn't have high hopes of what Afghan Taliban can do. But
Ahmed, we cannot hear you.
Yes, I was done actually. I was just probably you missed the last point. So what I was just saying that it makes good sense for the Pakistani government to still explore the Afghan-Taliban option. So there are more synthesizers probably within Afghan-Taliban with the TTP than they are not. I have no, and I agree with Khalid on that point. But it makes it makes sense to explore the Afghan-Taliban option. But and again, we should not have really very high hopes of these talks. As Khalid explained, and I agree with that. The history really doesn't encourage us to believe that something really very positive would come out of these talks.
Okay, this is a comment from Henry, who is listening to our space session right now, and he's saying, basically it's not a question, it's just a comment that he has made. TTP do not accept the Pakistani constitution. It is dangerous to engage with such groups from a position of weakness. Accept the constitution and lay down your arms or be killed on the battlefield should be the government position. So it's he's just commenting on it. I think as you have to leave at 10, we should move quickly to the Iranian part of our discussion.
I agree, and I'm here with you for another 40 minutes, Qudsiya.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, recently it came to light that the suicide bomber who targeted Chinese nationals in Balochistan province last month, he came from Iran. And also the mastermind of the attack he was living in Iran. So counter-terrorism department Quetta said that the 3 terrorists that were caught, they were all Iranian. And as you all know, they had conducted an unsuccessful suicide attack on a convoy of Chinese engineers in Gwadar. And this week, FIA's anti-human trafficking cell, they arrested 10 Iranian nationals from Karachi who were traveling to the Gulf countries, mostly to Qatar, on fake Pakistani documents. And some people in the media are also reporting that trade has been suspended at Pakistan-Iran border in Gwadar, Balochistan. So how much truth there is in this news that the trade between Pakistan and Iran has stopped? What do you say, Emma?
I don't have any official confirmation of this. So it might be possible. I don't think it's a good idea. I think we should manage our differences with Iran, keeping trade separate from the strategic and security issues. Trade actually is in our benefit. We are sending our own goods and products to Iranian markets, possibly using Iran as a conduit to Turkey, to Iraq, to Azerbaijan. It's in our interest, and I'm sure it's also in the interest of the Iranians. So the trade, I think, should be separated from the strategic and the political issues. Now, coming to the other points you mentioned, if we can details, it's a long story. The 3 citizens who were caught in Gwadar with relation to the attack on the convoy of Chinese engineers, it's not surprising because, frankly, I still recall the statement of Iranian Vice Foreign Minister at that time in December 2018 probably, or 2019. Yes, December 2019, Sheikh al-Islam is the Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs during a visit to New Delhi, during an interview with ANI, which is Indian News Wire Service. He said basically that Iran does not have any problem with Gwadar or with Chinese investments in Pakistan and Balochistan. At the same time, his personal advice is that it would be better for both Pakistan and China to use Chabahar instead of Gwadar, mainly because, in his words, he said Pakistan, Balochistan is not safe, whereas Iran and Iranian cities are much safer than Pakistan, and especially Balochistan. And it will be better for both countries, and Iran offers both China and Pakistan. It was a short, very interesting interview with ANI during one of the routine visits by him to New Delhi. But I thought that statement by him, Sheikh Islam, by the way, died 6 or 7 months later due to COVID last year in 2020. He passed away, I think it was in April or May 2020, he passed away because of COVID. So basically what I'm saying here is Iranian negative role toward APEC, and of course the Chabahat, their network of Kubashinias, of all of that, we know about all of that. The interesting point right now, Qudsiya, is that these are very disturbing. I'm not sure how Pakistan is dealing or raising this. I know that this is being raised through the appropriate channels. We have political channels, we have government to government, and we also have intelligence channels. And this is being raised through all 3 channels with the appropriate authorities in Iran. I'm not sure exactly how those talks are going, but it's interesting to note, Qudsiya, that so far, at least on the publicly at least, Iran has been very cautious and careful not to go all out against Pakistan. Basically, the Iranians are upset at Pakistan's participation in the Three Brothers military exercises in Azerbaijan with Turkey and Azerbaijan, obviously. Iranians are not happy with that. They, in fact, moved their own military equipment to the border with Azerbaijan and have a very tense situation with Azerbaijan right now because of a number of reasons. One of them is the military drills, but there's also the question of a few truck drivers from Iran who were arrested by Azerbaijan. So a number of things are coming together. And then, of course, we have the situation in Afghanistan and Iran's suspicion that Pakistan has tremendously multiplied its influence inside Afghanistan to Iran's and Iranian interests' detriment. And obviously the whole investment that Iran also made in Afghanistan over the past quarter century since mid to late 1990s has been hurt by the developments in Kabul post August 15. So all of these things have created some tension. I think with these little small tidbits of news that we've heard that you listed right now, Qudsiya, are just a sign and an indication of the simmering tensions. But both governments in Tehran and in Islamabad have so far kept these tensions under the lid. It's not good. The situation is not good. Tensions exist. It's serious. It could escalate at some point. And these little signs that you just mentioned are signs that should be very disturbing, obviously, from the Pakistani point of view. But let's see how Pakistan deals with them. I have no doubt that they have been dealt, but the Pakistani authorities are dealing with the Iranians on these points very firmly and raising them very firmly. But will that method work? Will it be different from the numerous occasions over the past, I would say, 3 decades that Pakistan has dealt with similar instances and actions, especially covert actions from, for example, the Quds Force or the IRGC? That's yet to be seen when we have confirmed details of how this episode was handled.
Right. We can only hope that the relationship between Pakistan and Iran will improve. At the moment, it seems difficult for the recent developments that we have seen. Khalid, I want to take this next question. It's by Shamsuddin. And he's asking, as we say, ISI is the best agency, but Iran is doing a lot of things here in Pakistan. What has been done in this regard? Iran has been active for nearly 2 decades, but why they have not been caught before?
I think it's incorrect to say that they have not been caught before.
Right.
First off, you have to understand that everything the ISI does is not made public. It's not part of the intelligence services. manifesto to stand up and take a bow. You just have to understand that Pakistan's ISI has protected Pakistan since 1947 in a way that no other intelligence agency has ever been able to serve their own country. I agree with a lot of Ahmed's assessment. I mean, he's very clear on what's going on. I actually have a couple of points to add. We have to understand that Iran's soil has been used against Pakistan for quite a while now. Gulbashan was based there. His entire network was running from there. If you recall, Mullah Mansour, when he was coming back into Pakistan, he was coming back into Pakistan from Iran when he was hit on with the drone strike in Balochistan. We have to understand that Iran can play a double game with us very easily because we have a trust level with them and we have a belief structure that they are a friendly neighbor and we have stood by them, so they will stand by us. But if we look at past history with Iran, we haven't always been the best of friends. And what I am actually looking at right now, because of the time of year it is I'm looking at Bharat-China, which is a little bit hostile. Those that understand what the situation in Bharat-China is, what kind of elements are there, will understand why I'm expecting it to get hostile. But this time of year, we always see in the Kohat Bharat-China area, there is always some kind of an attack, there's some kind of a problem. And that is where we start seeing things expand from. Iran on its own border, I don't think closing trade is a good idea. As long as there are trade relations between countries, there are conversations between countries. Militarily and covertly, what may be going on is being watched. It is being followed. The reason we're having the successes we're having and people are finding out about what has happened is because we are having successes. One attack getting through, two attacks getting through is not going to hurt us. But the 50-60 that we do stop are a significant achievement for the ISI. Now, before anyone says, I have a lot of great things to say about the ISI, you have to understand it is probably the lowest funded intelligence service in the world. And they are protecting Pakistan from many, many, many different types of attacks. The way our intelligence services has grown and matured from one DG to another DG, it has been, almost watching a child grow from childhood all the way to adulthood. So we have to understand that not everything is made public. What has happened in the background, what we have stopped, that is not always going to be put out there for everyone to see. But you have to understand that what we say in our community, that if the ISI were to close its eyes for 5 minutes, we would not have Pakistan anymore. And I
completely agree. Right. Ahmed, can you please take this next question? This is from Fajat. And he's saying that Pakistan and Iran seem to be getting into a regional conflict, starting with Afghanistan and now Azerbaijan. Do you see an alliance to confront Iran getting created?
Okay, this is very interesting, Qudsiya, because right now Iran has a problem on its border with Iraq. It has a problem on its border with Turkey and Azerbaijan. It has a problem on its border with Afghanistan, and it has a problem on its border with Pakistan. So Iran right now has a problem with these major countries, the immediate neighbors. Not surprising, because a lot of people expected this when President Ibrahim Raisi was elected, a hardline cleric and he brought on a hardline team into the government, including the foreign minister. So and by the way, the foreign minister, when the Chinese foreign minister on the sidelines of the Dushanbe SCO summit in Tajikistan, when the Chinese foreign minister tried to call for a sideline meeting of foreign ministers of Pakistan, Iran, and Russia to mediate the differences over Afghanistan, it was very interesting to note that the Iranian foreign minister, officially they did not communicate that the foreign minister will not attend, but de facto, at the moment of the meeting, in the meeting room, the Iranian foreign minister did not show up, and instead a lower level officer of the Iranian foreign ministry showed up, who is in charge of Iran's relations with West Asia and probably Central Asia or something like that. So somebody who's a desk officer showed up much lower level actually than not even a deputy foreign minister. I'm not sure about this, exactly his exact designation, but he was a lower officer and it was not communicated officially. So it was interesting to note that that the Iranian foreign minister was not willing to sit with the Pakistani foreign minister and the Chinese foreign minister and the Russian foreign minister to discuss the issues or the differences, and it was left for a lower level officer of the ministry to talk to all three countries. Very interesting. So what I'm saying is basically that with Ibrahim Raisi as president, it was expected that Iran would become more hardline, so it's not surprising to see Iran's relationship right now, Iran having these problems with Iraq. In Iraq, of course, there's the whole issue, the protest in Baghdad, and largely Iraqi Shia Muslim groups are protesting against Iran-backed militias which are in power in Baghdad. Azerbaijan, of course, we just discussed that. Azerbaijan has the three brothers, the Druze, and the arrest of Iranian truck drivers and so forth, and Iran's relationship with Armenia, which Azerbaijan, of course, has suspicions with. And then, of course, there's Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that's one key point. And another is, I think we need to be very clear also with the fact that after 1979, Iran, in our neighborhood, Iran had developed the most robust military intelligence relationship with Pakistan's arch rival, India. No other country in this neighborhood of ours developed, and I'm basically, and this started not in the 1980s, this started actually in early 1990s, 92, 93, 94, 95, and reached a pinnacle immediately after 9/11 in 2003 and 4 with the defense pact between India and Iran, and the most important part is the de facto Iranian-Indian alliance in Afghanistan since the mid-1990s in Afghanistan, with the one objective of containing Pakistan's influence. So with these 3, 4, 5 points, when you keep them in mind, the only natural conclusion to reach is that Iran is in competition, in a strategic competition with Pakistan for power. It is very, very obvious in Afghanistan, very open, but it also extends to other around us. It extends to India, it extends to the Arabian Sea, it extends to the Gulf and the Middle East. So it is a competition. It's silent in all of those areas. It has become a little vocal and noisy in Afghanistan, and for the first time it has also become vocal in Azerbaijan. So we've always had, over the last 3 decades in Pakistan, very, very good, very close strategic relationship with Azerbaijan for the past 30 years. But it's now that it's coming to the fore, to the open, our relationship with Azerbaijan and Iran's apparent objections. The statements that came not from any official of the Iranian government, but from parliamentarians in Tehran, from the Iranian media, condemning these drills, calling them a vehicle for imperialism, and very critical, very different language. It's obvious that it unnerved the decision makers, the policy makers in Tehran, to see that these 3 countries surrounding Iran, Turkey and Azerbaijan and Pakistan, doing these drills and a show of power. And you can imagine how the Iranians read it, to the point that they actually sent reinforcements to the border with Azerbaijan while these 3 countries' military deployments are still in Azerbaijan for the drills. So it is a very tense situation, and I think this is a conclusion. In Pakistan, I always say we have a taboo on discussing Iran's policies and strategic interest. It's an important neighbor. It's a large country. It's influential. And we in Pakistan must study it. We must understand. We must anticipate. We must analyze. Unfortunately, what I would call Iran studies have become embroiled in a religious debate that has nothing to do with politics and strategy directly. We need to reinstate that. We need to end that taboo. We need to discuss it openly so that we understand exactly where the Iranian politics is coming from. And I conclude with this. It is a strategic competition. It's not new. It's been happening since early 1990s. For 30 years, Pakistan and Iran are in a strategic competition. Openly in Afghanistan, quietly with regards to India, Arabian Sea Gulf, possibly Central Asia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and now Iraq also. Pakistan has a very good, strong political military relationship with the Iraqi government. I'm not sure. I think the Iranians would not look kindly at it. They're already dealing with the Americans in Iraq. They're already dealing with other Arab countries, the Gulf countries, the Saudis in Iraq, trying to develop good relationship with the Iraqi government. The last thing they need is to see Pakistan also developing military relationship with Iraq. That also, I think, would be one of the silent areas of tension between Pakistan and Iran. So it's fair to conclude it's a strategic competition. The Iranians are very clear. I think the confusion has been in Pakistan whether after 1979 Iran is a partner or a strategic competitor, and the competition element is quite clear. But you have to be in Pakistan. We have to be very careful because Iran has the ability to create trouble, and you have to manage this situation smartly, both by show of strength and also through diplomacy.
Right. So you are saying in Pakistan it is a taboo to discuss Iran. I think that is due to the sectarian element that we bring in, and we should stop seeing them as Shia versus Sunni issue, but a geostrategic issue. Right, Khalid, I have two more questions for Ahmed. Can you please wait for that a little while because Ahmed has to go. There are two more questions for him and then I will come to you. Is it fine with you?
Not a problem at all. I enjoy listening to Ahmed's analysis.
All right, great. Okay. Ahmed, it's someone, Malik, and he's asking how far can Israel go in preventing Iran to make a nuclear bomb? And shouldn't Pakistan cooperate with Israel in entertaining Iranian influence in the region through backdoor channels?
Right, and thank you, Khalid. You're very kind of you. And I always say Iran alone played the biggest role in Israel's diplomatic breakthroughs in this region. The Iranian policy, the hardline policy of the Iranian government after 1979 compelled gradually over the last 3 decades many strategic thinkers across the MENA region, the Middle East, North Africa, to conclude that they face a bigger threat from the IRGC and from the Iranian militias than they face from Israel. This policy by the IRGC, the militias and so forth, the show of power across the region, all of this really helped Israel break the barriers, the diplomatic barriers. And this is I say this with irony because apparently the declared policy of Iran is basically to contain and counter Israel. But the actual effect on the ground of this policy was to actually push many of Iran's neighbors closer to Israel. So that's the one observation. The other observation is with regards to, I think the second question, Qudsiya, is should Pakistan cooperate with Israel to contain Iran? Is that the question?
Let me tell you. The question is, and shouldn't Pakistan cooperate with Israel in countering Iranian influence in the region through backdoor channels?
Okay, this is very interesting because I've heard this from responsible people in several countries in our region that they've begun to really see Israel as an integral part of the security system in this region, specifically with regard to countering Iranian influence and Iranian militias. And this used to be taboo, really, to speak about this, to induct Israel into the regional security system. But now it's discussed openly across the region, and if you attend think tanks, events, and conferences across the region, and I'm referring to the region between, let's say, Egypt and Oman, and even Azerbaijan and Turkey. You hear this repeatedly from responsible people who work on security policy in various countries in this region. You hear them say that we seriously need to include Israel now because we cannot rely on the United States to counter Iran. We cannot rely on America to do this. America is not a trustworthy ally. The government change. There are people who are very close to Iran. And somehow they see Israel as a replacement for the U.S. with regards to balancing Iran's regional influence. So this is a regional reality. We may not discuss this in Pakistan quite often, but even when Pakistani officials, both civilian and military, when they attend events across the region, bilateral or multilateral, this is one of the things that often comes up, discussions where people do study or include Israel as part of the regional security structure and the need to engage Israel on that. Whether Pakistan should, and by the way, before I come to the Pakistan-Israel part, already many of the countries in the region do cooperate with Israel with regard to facing other regional threats, including the Iranian power flexing. For example, Azerbaijan has used Israeli products and Israeli expertise in the war with Armenia. So Azerbaijan did it quite openly. Other countries are doing it quietly. One of the key reasons why a small country like Bahrain, for example, has entered Abraham Accords and has this relationship, and I think that was based by the Israeli foreign minister visited Bahrain. And one of the reasons is actually, not one of the reasons, the only reason actually is to counter Iran. So it's already happening in the region. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I've, like all the other countries in the region, there are discussions in Pakistan as well, in think tanks, in informal, unofficial settings, where when you discuss and when you talk about Iranian power flexing and Iranian power in the region and how to counter it, honestly speaking, any realistic and pragmatist, any person who's a realist and a pragmatist would tell you that the only country in this whole region that can actually take or face the IRGC and the Iranian militias head-on with full power is Israel. No other country, including the United States, have shown the willingness to confront Iranian militias directly. Yes, the United States has periodically attacked some of the Iranian militias in Syria and in Iraq, but that was on a very limited scale. The only largest scale, and so has done Turkey as well, but the only country that has gone all out to attack on regular basis Iranian militias and their hideouts and their vital installations in both Syria and Iraq is Israel. So it's natural for military strategists across the region to conclude that while individually individually, countries do have the ability to counter Iran on specific cases. For example, Pakistan did shoot down an IRGC drone over the border in Balochistan in 2017, for example. Turkey did attack some Iranian militia positions in Syria. The U.S. did attack and eliminate Qasem Soleimani, for example, and other militia targets in Iraq. But it is Israel which has done the largest amount of damage to Iranian influence by sustained attacks on Iranian interests in both Syria and Iraq over the last 3 or 4 years. So yes, it's natural for a lot of people to talk about Israel in this. I personally do believe that Pakistan and Israel, as the only two nuclear-armed countries in this region so far, should be talking to each other and should be talking on security and strategic issues while keeping their political positions intact on other issues. We should be, and because Israel is a part of the security calculus in this region, and if there is a conflict between Israel and Iran, we will be dragged in, directly or indirectly. Obviously, we will not be part of it in Pakistan, but in terms of Iran's ability to organize protests across the region, Iran's ability to mobilize its proxies in the region, we can or we could be dragged indirectly, obviously. So we need to be cognizant of this and we need to be ahead of it. And the only way we can be ahead of it is by engaging with everyone, including Iran and including Israel.
Right. Okay. When it comes to Pakistan and Israel, obviously there are arguments on both sides of this debate, and it's a very heated topic, I would say. Now we have a question from Zishan Sheikh, and he is asking that is Iran supporting BLA, BLF, etc.? Because 2 days ago, a terrorist attack on FC checkpost that took place, Iranians were involved in that, and 2 of our soldiers were martyred. So he's asking about whether Iran is supporting these terrorist groups, BLA and BLF. Ahmed, please go ahead.
I have no doubt that Iran is supporting some of these groups. Iran is also supporting, frankly speaking, every country has some links to some of the militant groups of the region. Iran has contact with a number of them, obviously, including these Pakistani groups. Also, I do recall 6 or 7 years ago, some of the Uzbek and Chechen fighters who actually made it to Quetta and other parts of Balochistan actually came from, not from Afghanistan, they came from Iran, and some of them actually did say that they stayed in Iran in state custody for some time and they were giving sanctuary. So, you can conclude that Iran also did provide sanctuary to some of these groups, not necessarily to fight Pakistan, but as part of their wider strategy of establishing relations with militant groups. So they did that. But yes, as far as Pakistani, some of the groups that are active, the terror groups that are active in Pakistan, Iran is supporting them. There's no question about this. The Jabahar terror network of Kulbashin Yedov was not operating alone. There is no doubt that there were elements within at least the IRGC and the Quds Force who were aware of what the Indians were doing in Pakistan exactly and what assets they were developing. Let's not forget that some of the Indian assets in both Balochistan and Karachi, the Indian assets in both Balochistan and Karachi overlapped with the IRGC assets in both Balochistan and Karachi. And the investigations that have taken place between 2015 and until recently discovered many overlapping and many interconnections Indian and Iranian assets in both these regions, Karachi and Balochistan. So there was definitely a degree of overlap and coordination and contact and cooperation between the aspects of these two countries. And when those actually were located in Chabahar up until 2016 at least, it's obvious that there was some sort of cooperation. So the brief answer is yes, Iran, or elements in Iran at least, are actually supporting some of these groups.
Right. Khalid, now I have a question. This is Mateen, and he's asking that if TTP leaders surrender and they become normal citizens, can they stand in the elections? Can they go to foreign countries? Or will they be able to apply in government positions? And he also wants to know who is supporting the TTP within Pakistan, and do they have any link with the Afghan Taliban?
Okay, three-part question. Number one, normal citizens. I don't think the idea even exists that TTP fighters could become normal citizens. The ideology, the belief structure is not even something that can operate inside of our normal society. So unless there is an extremely far-right political party that creates itself and gives these people a chance, then they would get a chance. But as per the Constitution of Pakistan, I don't believe they can stand in an election or hold government office. So that's beside the point. Can you repeat the second question for me?
Okay. The second part of the question is, he was asking, who is supporting the TTP within Pakistan, and do they have any link with the Afghan Taliban?
Okay, I think you'd be extremely surprised into how the TTP gets support, and it's not from the channels where you would expect. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it'll be religious seminaries, madrasas, Lal Masjid. Those are obvious. Those will support the TTP. You'd be surprised at how many businessmen donate money to the TTP, or donate, give, support, whatever color you want to give it. You'd be surprised how many of Pakistan's biggest business people put money into the coffers of the TTP. That was, I think, when we started Command 11, I think that was one of the most astounding facts to us, because we always looked at it from the point of view that, yes, there are extremist madrasas that are off-book, are there to train, give the ideology that can later go to a camp and be molded into a fighter. And then you would have the groups that would support, like your different jihadi groups that would step forward and offer money. You would think those would be the only people. The surprising thing is you have journalists, you have media houses, you have very wealthy industrialists that you would never believe would be supporters of the TTP that are donating funds. And those funds are used to kill Pakistan. So, I mean, that's something we have to keep in mind. In terms of how do we handle all these supporters, this is where the problem comes in terms of amnesty conversations. Because there are different layers of how the TTP operates, there has to be different levels of discussions that go on. Just by laying down your arms does not end my fight with terrorism in Pakistan. That is something we have to be very clear about. That just because the TTP lays down their arms does not mean our problem with terrorism is gone. The ideology of extremism, the ideology of manipulated jihadism, these things have to be worked out from a very, very grassroots level here in Pakistan. That support base that exists can only be wiped out when we as a nation work together and go down to the grassroots and start working on that ideology. That ideology has become a problem for Pakistan on so many levels. But because we don't have control over the madrasas, we don't have control over all of the imami masjids, we don't have the ability to dictate from that point of view. Now, I think the single national curriculum idea that Imran Khan has implemented is a good first step, but we also need to understand that there needs to be a grassroots level effort where people have got to wipe this ideology out of Pakistan so we can win this fight once and for all. The third part of the question, is there any support or any linkages with the Taliban? This has been something that's been debated since 2007. While Mullah Umar was alive, I believe that there were numerous statements from the senior Taliban leadership that there are no links between us and the Taliban Pakistan. That does not mean that commanders don't support them. That does not mean that other fighters do not support them. It does not mean that other groups and splinters within the Taliban do not support them. The problem that we're seeing today with, and I'll go 4 days backwards, there was a video that emerged of Pakistani forces firing into Kunar on TTP basis, and the Taliban stepping in between and saying, if you keep firing, we will fire back. Now, that is something that's created a lot of concern within our think tank community and within the intelligence community is in terms of how deep are the divisions within the Taliban itself. The links do exist. The sympathies also exist. Numerous support channels are also provided to the TTP from the Taliban, but as a policy that they show the world, they do not support the TTP. Now, what happens over the next 6 months in Afghanistan will actually tell us for sure whether they actually do or do not believe in what they are telling the world.
Right. Okay, this is Salman Ahmedullah, and he's asking, please can you give a comparative analysis of the situation in 2007 and of the present day? And can TTP stage a comeback like that of 2007?
Okay, let's start with 2007. 2007, Lal Masjid happened. The entire jihadi community of Pakistan was enraged. They were furious at the Pakistan army. They bound together in a ragtag group that we call the Taliban Pakistan. If you recall, in the beginning, they were not as violent towards citizens as they became over time. In the beginning, the TTP was very splintered. Central command wasn't completely structured, and there were a lot of outside forces playing inside of the TTP. But if you recall, when hostilities started with India, the TTP itself announced, and you'll find this in the newspapers from, I think it was 2009, 2010, the TTP itself announced that they would stop their fight with the Pakistan army and they would stand with the army against India if India decided to wage war against Pakistan. Now, at that point, we understood the loyalties of the TTP as being, well, they're upset about something, but they've taken the wrong route in terms of solving their problem. Now, where we stand today, the TTP is now battle-hardened. They have fought in Afghanistan alongside the Taliban there. They have fought in Pakistan against the Pakistan army. They have received training from ISIS Syria, ISIS Afghanistan, that facilitated by the ISIS Khorasan group, because these camps were literally within kilometers of each other. Some of them even shared a wall, I'll put it that way. So there's been a lot of knowledge increase for them in terms of becoming terrorists they were not before. Before they were fighters, they had an ideology, they wanted to fight. They have now become a very mature fighting force. Some of our sources inside of Afghanistan have told us that they've received so much training that they can actually now compete with our SSGs. That is a very frightening statement for us, that if there is a group within the TTP that has that capability to come to fight our SSGs, that is a major advantage given to them. You also have to understand they've matured to the point where they have now become very good target assassins. In SWAT, for example, many of the attacks that have happened here, they have come out of cornfields, shot somebody, got on a motorcycle, and disappeared. Now, that's a maturity that we never saw the TTP before. So we need to be very concerned about where this fight is going next. What we saw before was a very immature fight. A group of people that got together behind one idea and decided they were going to fight for whatever they wanted, whether it be to loot and murder, whether it be to steal, or whether it be spread Islam. We don't know the motivations of every fighter. But now what we have are professional fighters. These people have gotten training at a level we could never have expected them getting before. And we have to be very concerned as to what kind of damage they cause in Pakistan. Because if you remember the Karachi explosion when they attacked the CID center, when they attacked the Marriott in Islamabad, those were not small attacks, but that was still a very immature group. Today we are talking about a group that understands how to make a car bomb with ball bearings, with screws, with nails that will do serious damage. So the understanding that we need to have is the quantity or the size of the force is not that big, but the quality of the force has increased significantly. And we need to make very, very clear security decisions in terms of how our framework, how our operations will go, how our kinetic response will be. Because if these attacks start in Pakistan, there will be a massive swing in public opinion. And we saw it in the early 2009, 2010, during the SWAT operation. We saw a lot of people swinging and saying we should stop fighting. We should stop fighting. It'll at least kill. It'll stop the killing. That was us literally taking a knee. We need to be careful that if it happens again, Pakistan is not ready. We cannot take this kind of a hit this time. Internationally, we'll be embarrassed. Domestically, we'll be shattered. Our economy is gone. Our security is gone. Our position in the world is gone. And every enemy has success. That is what we have to understand now. So there's no comparison between 2007 and 2021. There are two completely different forces now. This is not the fight we had before. This is very different. That is why they're having so much success in Fatah. That is why our shahadats are going up, because they are coming at us from inside our own border and outside of our border. And we need to start thinking much, much more carefully in how our security response needs to be.
Right. Farjad is asking who is funding and arming the TTP. Let's have clarity on that. I think that we have discussed this before.
Yes, we have discussed the funding and the arming, but...
But his first question, I think we haven't discussed that one. He's asking, how can we have talks with the TTP when they represent no one in Pakistan? Is this a correct statement that they represent no one?
It's not a correct statement. See, that's where the problem is. It's not a correct statement that they represent no one in Pakistan. Again, the TTP is not a group where they can carry a badge or they can put a flag on their house and they can openly show their support that we believe in this ideology. But what you have to understand is grassroots level, a lot of people believe what the TTP is doing. And they understand, even in Swat, I hail from Swat, I'm from the district. It's why I came back and fought here when the TTP was here. Even in Swat, the people here in different areas still say, it wasn't so bad. At least we had justice. At least we had security. But those are the people that aligned and believed in what the TTP was doing. The people that did not support what the TTP was doing, they were living in fear. They couldn't come out of their houses. When they came out of their houses, they were afraid of who was going to follow them and who was going to attack them. The understanding has to be that you have to talk to them. Militarily, we cannot wipe them out because we don't know where their shadow supporters are. We don't know where their silent supporters are. We cannot expose them in any way because we don't have a way to expose them. You have to understand that. There is no way we can expose every single person that supports the TTP. Understanding that, you have to understand that you cannot come to a military solution. There has to be a negotiated ceasefire. There has to be a negotiated surrender of weapons. There has to be a negotiated level of justice. We have lost 80,000 Pakistanis to these people's hands. Many of those commanders, many of those fighters have been killed in fights, drone strikes, bombings. They're gone. That does not mean that we go, thank you very much, we accept your apology and please come to Pakistan and live your lives here. We cannot do that. Because this is a problem that will raise its head again under a different flag, under a different ideology, with a different motive, but the same methodology. So what Imran Khan is doing is, I would say 25% correct. Yes, you should talk to them. But before before you start talking to them, you need to start addressing their ideology. You need to take out stories, videos on TV where you talk about where this ideology is wrong, where it does not actually fit with Islam and what Islam teaches. Jihad, yes, is for all of us. It is a requirement for all of us, but not the jihad that they are fighting. That has to be clear. We are not able to build a narrative for this. You cannot win this militarily. You cannot completely defeat this at the negotiating table, but you are not looking at the other parts of the problem. What Imran Khan is doing is right, again, on a 25% scale. It is not right for 75% of the problem, because that part of the problem we cannot eliminate just by negotiating. There has to be something in the background that works to educate the Pakistani people that what they're teaching, what they're saying, is not what Islam teaches. Until you can plant that in people's heads and help them understand that, you will have people, as they become against the government, and that's what we're saying is when you decide you're not going to support the government of Pakistan, whether it be Noon League, whether it be People's Party, whether it be PTI, you're not going to support the government. All of a sudden you start aligning with these non-state actors. And that's how PTM has grown. That is how TTP has found its influence and its support. That is where the National Democratic Movement has come from, because they saw there is a support base. There are people that listen. There are people that follow. That has created an organization that we can use them, mobilize them, use them to deliver what we want. So, yes, Imran is right in what he's doing. He's not leading Pakistan down that path, because we still have a Pakistan army. We still have an intelligence service that can pull this back. That can start targeted attacks against senior leadership within the TTP that is not negotiating with us. Right now, Geopolitics group is negotiating. They've announced a 20-day ceasefire. That is a good step. The rest of the TTP is still attacking our RFC. It's still attacking the Bajwa Scouts. It's still attacking Khyber Rifles. We cannot close our eyes. We also have to look at the alliances that are forming with the BLA, because those will be used to leverage against China, which is a massive blow for us diplomatically, economically, and from a point of view of growth and development in this country. There are many things at play right now. We have to be looking at this from the point of view of we've stepped one step forward, we need to go 3 more steps forward. Once we go those 3 steps forward, then we need to go 5 more steps forward. Only then will we see a solution to this problem. Stop thinking of this from a point of view of Iran is doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Iran is taking the first step. We now, as a nation, have to stand in behind him, support him, and help deliver what else we need to do for the country. Because the decisions made at the negotiating table can only be implemented once this country stands together and has a plan to wipe out the ideology.
Right. Okay, now I have a question from Umar, and he's asking, why do the business people support the TTP? What is their point of view?
Well, I would turn that question in another way. Why did Shahbaz Sharif offer to give the TTP safe haven and sanctuary as long as they didn't attack the Punjab? So everyone has their own interests. It doesn't matter that you give. The understanding we have to find is why do you give? And some of the business people that have given, and I'm very honestly telling you this, crores of rupees, millions of rupees to these terror groups, they have to be asked why. What motivated you to give this money? What we've heard from people that we know, a lot of people have said, I support the idea of an Islamic system in Pakistan. We don't have what Islam teaches. Now again, that goes back to our ideology. What does Islam teach? Does Islam teach you that you need people with swords and guns on the street, that if you don't follow the Islamic law, we need to shoot you or we need to cut off your hand on sight? No, that's not what Islam teaches. The laws of Sharia are very, very beautiful, alhamdulillah. You will not punish the one who is weak, you will punish the one that is strong. And it is the responsibility of the state to provide for everything that the people need. I understand that is the motivation behind why these business people are giving money, but that shouldn't be the motivation. There are other avenues they could use to channel their funds to deliver the system they want in Pakistan without supporting a terrorist group. So the motivations vary. Some people support the idea of jihad. Some people support the ideas of overthrowing a government violently. Some people like the idea of how General Zia ran Pakistan, where there was a Sharia law, there was a Hudud ordinance, people were punished in stadiums. Some people like those ideas. That's why they continue their support. But we have to, as a nation, drill down, get to the grassroots and wipe out the ideology that believes that Islam is a violent religion. It is not. It is a beautiful religion. It's a beautiful way of life if you understand it. If you understand it. So the motivations is very, very different as to why people give money. But the solution to it comes back to what I'm saying here. You need to wipe out the ideology.
I completely agree with you that we cannot just fight them militarily. This is the ideology mainly that we have to fight and change. Ahmed, if you're still here, I've received a question for you. Can you please reply to this? It's a okay. It's from Saqib Khan, and he's saying that why Pakistan acts as deaf and blind state when it comes to the Iranian proxies. Is it just because we have strong Iranian lobby in our power corridors, or the state is afraid of sectarian backlash? A recent threatening tone conveyed by the Iranian state-run news outlets shows that our silence is being taken as weakness. Compared to Iran, our state acts aggressively against KSA, despite the fact that KSA stood with us through thick and thin. What do you have to say, Ahmed?
Right. There was some signal issue, so I missed a few words in the question. So basically what I understood is the question is why Pakistan does not respond aggressively to Iranian actions.
Yes.
And the other point was about what the alliances. There was something about alliances.
Basically, he's saying that there is a threatening tone from the Iranian state-run news outlets, but there is complete silence on Pakistan's part, and this may be taken as weakness.
Right. Okay. So first of all, you have to understand one thing here. If of course you're referring to the recent reports in the Iranian media on Pakistan foot soldiers in Panjshir in Afghanistan, and Pakistani meddling and ISI meddling in Afghanistan, which a couple of outlets, some Farsi outlets and some English outlets in Iran published. We have to understand one thing. No Iranian government official said this. The closest that maybe, if somebody came to that, was the spokesman of the Iranian Foreign Ministry, and he was very careful not to antagonize Pakistan. So officially, nothing has come from Iran which would antagonize Pakistan. What has come is these reports in Iranian media. So whatever Iran wanted to, or some elements within the Iranian government wanted to convey, they did so through some outlets in the Iranian media. Any response from Pakistan, I'm assuming, obviously, if there were to be a response, cannot be diplomatically at a higher level. It would be definitely at the same level, at the level of media. And if you are referring to the terror actions inside Balochistan, the response to that is not something that we probably can discuss here. The response to that would be calibrated again by state institutions, and they would decide, because there is multiple ways to respond and multiple tools to do that. Through diplomatic pressure, political, and so forth. There are various layers, and there's a ladder of escalation that all the states actually follow. So I have no doubt, actually, that, first of all, I do not believe that there is a Iranian lobby in Pakistan stopping the Pakistani government or anything. I think this is not true. There's no such lobby. What is there, though, is there are some proxies of the IRGC, and it's very important to point out those proxies are not necessarily within the Pakistani Shia community. There are Iranian proxies inside Pakistan who within outside the Shia community. There are Sunni Muslims who are also proxies inside Pakistan and elsewhere. Because again, this is not a religious thing. This is a strategic gameplay, and all tools and all elements are used, and everybody uses them. So there is no lobby per se, but Iran and the IRGC in particular, they're very influential across the region, not just inside Pakistan. They have influence to proxies and so forth across the region. And they have the ability to create trouble. And I think no country would like to have to get into that. But when Pakistan was tested in the summer of 2017, when a very large surveillance spy drone that clearly belonged to the IRGC was spotted inside Pakistani territory in Balochistan, Pakistan did not hesitate, number one, to send a fighter jet from Pakistan Air Force to shoot it down, number two, to officially announce that through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and number three, the Pakistani media openly published it and even published pictures of the drone after it was destroyed and fell within or inside Pakistani territory. So Pakistan has, and Pakistan demonstrated the ability to counter. The same thing Pakistan did, of course, when Indian drones infiltrated Pakistan through Kashmir. So Pakistan has the ability to act. Pakistan has actually acted. Let us also not forget that Pakistan busted the whole Chabahar terror network and confronted Iran on that in 2016. I think there are very, very few examples in the world where a visiting head of state of a neighboring country, another country, it was or is confronted, was confronted with evidence of all of this when obviously former President of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, was in Islamabad, and he was raised with, and this issue was raised with him, and it was done publicly through the ISPR, and I think also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So the whole impression that there's a lobby that is stopping it in government, I do not subscribe to that there is a lobby. Yes, Pakistan has a peculiar situation where we have this problem of the sectarianism, and often it's easily exploited by outsiders. Anyone who would like to destabilize Pakistan on any issue can easily exploit sectarianism, and a number of countries have done that. So it's yes, that is also a weapon that the IRGC can exploit, and they have. They've tried on a few occasions to blackmail the Pakistani government or the military on a couple of occasions using the sectarianism card. It has been done. The Indians have tried to do it as well. There's a lot of evidence on that as well. So that's we need to have clarity on this. Pakistan has the ability to respond. Pakistan has responded. The Chabahar terror network was a joint project of the IRGC and the Indian intelligence at Chabahar. It was Pakistan struck that very bluntly. Pakistan shot down an IRGC drone. It was a major escalation by Pakistan. It was no small thing. The Iranians could have responded. They didn't. They chose to not to escalate the tensions at that time. So Pakistan has the ability to confront, and let's not forget that Pakistan participated in drills in Azerbaijan despite Iranian concerns. Pakistan is developing relationship with Iraq, with the Iraqi government, despite uneasiness in some security elements in Tehran. So Pakistan is doing all of that, is balancing it. But at the same time, Pakistan is trying not to escalate it to the point of no return. Iran is an important neighbor, it's an important country. You have to deal with whatever government that is there in Tehran, whether you like it or not. You have to deal with them. You have interest, and they have to deal with Pakistan as well. So the Iranians deal, and they try to avoid escalation. Like, for example, when the drone was shut down, they chose not to speak. They let it go, and so forth. There are many other. When President Rouhani was confronted here in Islamabad, when the Indian officer was arrested in Pakistan, the Iranians chose to not to escalate in all of those instances. And that's what as neighboring countries do actually. They manage the conflict. That's what Iran and Azerbaijan are doing, for example, right now. That's exactly what Iraq and Iran are doing also. So this is how it works, and that's what we in India also do oftentimes. So this is how it's working.
Right. Just right now, I'm reading reports that the TTP have denied that there are any talks being held with the state of Pakistan. That is the main issue when we have negotiations with them. This puts or portrays Pakistan in a bad light and from a position of weakness. When we are telling the world that we are holding talks with them, they are denying it. So I don't know how much truth there is in this report. What do you have to say on this, Ahmed and Khalid?
I defer to Khalid on this. He's an expert on this.
Right, and we should wrap up a session also because it's...
Thank you, Ahmed. You have to understand that I made this statement earlier that the TTP is more than 10 groups. You have multiple splinters inside of those groups and outside of those groups. And the main TTP leadership, the groups other than Haji Gul Bahar, are all against the idea of negotiating with Pakistan. They have set their terms. We want a Sharia government. We want Sharia law implemented throughout Pakistan. And then we will sit down and talk. And that is something that the government of Pakistan cannot do. Because the Sharia that we will implement will actually be following the Quran and Sunnah. And if you want the Sharia law that you had in Swat, well, that's not something that Pakistan would accept. So we expected this. I saw these reports earlier this morning coming through when the government of Pakistan was having this statement that we had started negotiations. The media had covered the story that we had started negotiations. Obviously, the TTP had to respond. Haji Gul Bahar Group has already said publicly that they've announced a 20-day ceasefire to give negotiations a chance. That does not mean the rest of the TTP has to follow. And this was expected. This is why I said we cannot trust the partner on the other side of the table. And these are the reasons why I don't believe the word amnesty should even be brought up at this point.
Right. Okay, and now let's wrap up the session with this last question. Shamsuddin is asking, in the present situation, many political parties in Pakistan are working against the interest of the country and the people. What will happen regarding this hybrid war? Khalid, you can answer first and then I will take Ahmed.
Well, I think first thing we have to understand is that the political parties of Pakistan, while they may have done some work in the national interest of Pakistan, the majority of the work they have done has been in the interest of themselves, in the interest of achieving a lifetime control of a political party seat. It is not a surprise to us that they are at war again while Pakistan is being challenged externally. What can we expect? You have to remember Bilal's statement when I think it was Mohsen Dawar was arrested or Ali Wazir was arrested for anti-army statements. Bilal said, I cannot believe he's been arrested. He's such a good person. I can't believe he said something like this. And we've seen support, we've seen conversations between PTI senators, PTI members, and a belief structure developed there. But we have to be careful. Political parties have the ability to overthrow governments. Political parties have the ability to change international opinion of the country. Political parties have the ability, because they have the funds, to engage lobby organizations around the world in international capitals that will undermine Pakistan's mission overall. What are they up to? I have no idea. I really try and stay away from politics because it's such a dirty little game that it gives you a headache, and positions change so quickly that it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you're correct.
In terms of national security, I don't think any of them have the ability to make any kind of significant impact. I do think they have the ability to affect us diplomatically around the world, and that's where we have to be concerned.
Okay, very quickly, two follow-up questions. There was a question about the business people supporting TTP. Who answered that question? Umar is asking a follow-up question, and he's saying that has Pakistan taken action against such businessmen, or can they support them again as they resurface, as the Taliban resurface?
Pakistan has taken action. I was one that answered the question. Yeah, Pakistan has taken action against them. They are now on a list. All of their bank accounts, all of their funds, all of their telephone lines. They are under surveillance because they are now considered possible hostile elements. So yes, we have taken action as a nation. We have taken action as a military. Can we arrest them? No, that is not a possibility because there are certain things we cannot explain. And it's not explaining it to our own people, it's explaining it to the international community. When you have major business people of Pakistan supporting terrorist elements, that makes the argument that India has been making for decades very, very true. And we cannot give that kind of opportunity to our enemies. So yes, we have handled it internally. We've kept it very quiet. No one has ever found out which business people they were, which divisions they were, which industries they were. That was done for a specific reason. We have to keep Pakistan's international image in mind when we do things like this, and it's best that we keep certain things quiet. But yes, there has been a system put in place to make sure they cannot do it again, and there's a good understanding that this time funding will have to come from outside of Pakistan because inside of Pakistan it's not possible anymore.
Okay, that's good news. There's a follow-up question for Ahmed. Farjad is asking, are there pro-Pakistan elements in Iran, like we have Iran Proxy?
Yes, there are pro-Pakistan elements. Actually, we have lots of good friends in the Iranian Foreign Service. We also have elements within the Iranian Armed Forces, especially the Air Force and the Navy. Also, to some extent, maybe the Army, although I doubt they still are in service. These people exist, and goodwill exists. Why? Because of the fact that many officers. And by the way, when I say armed forces of Iran, I'm referring to the Army, Navy, and Air Force, not to the IRGC, the Bazdaran. So the Army, Navy, and Air Force, which to some extent have been sidelined, they come after the IRGC, which is now the main military force of Iran and directly under the Supreme Leader Khamenei. But the armed forces, actually, the officers, many who were trained in Pakistan in late 1970s and early 80s, who might still be in service, some have retired. Those people do have quite goodwill from the days of the Shah, of course. Lots of goodwill, and within the Iranian intellectual community there are many who understand, who appreciate Pakistan. One of them actually was here in Islamabad, I think a couple of years ago, Alex Watan Kha, who is an Iranian scholar born in Tehran, but I think he moved now to the US, and he came to Islamabad and he spent, I think, about almost a year here in Islamabad interviewing people to write a book on the history of relationship between Pakistan and Iran over the last 6 or 7 decades. And he wrote a very, very nice, I think, the most important book on this relationship, which was published, I think, a couple of years, a year ago or so. And so we have many friends. But I will make a distinction here between all of these people that I mentioned and the government in Iran. I think if you're referring to the government and the government structure in Iran right now, specifically after 1979, it's very obvious that the Pakistan-Iran relationship lost a large part of its natural warmth after 1979. At no point after 1979 we were able in this relationship to recreate the environment that existed before 1979. before 79, of course, it was a very, very close relationship, a strategic relationship, very close to the point that Iranian officials from across the Iranian system actually were frequent visitors to Pakistan at a level, not seen with probably any other country for Iran except the United States. So it was either the US or Pakistan, and to some extent also Turkey. So Turkey, Pakistan, the US, Iran enjoyed very, very good relationship with them before 79, obviously not so much after 79. Iran does have a very robust relationship with many in the US, for example, many with Turkey now, with Pakistan, but it's not at the level that existed before 79. It's very obvious because Iran actually did change focus and policy after 79 to a great extent.
Right. Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you, Khalid. Today we had a very, I would say, informative discussion on Pakistan-TTP talks and Iran's proxy war inside Pakistan. I'm really grateful for your time. Those of you who have just joined, this session has been recorded and it will be shared later on. And if you have missed any part, you can listen to it and watch it again. Thank you once again, Khalid Muhammad of Command 11 and famous Pakistani journalist Ayman Qureshi. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Qudsiya. We enjoyed being here, and thank you to everyone who listened.
Yeah, it was an extreme pleasure. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you everyone, and Allah Hafiz.